Okay, you ready for this? We're going deep inside the mind of Donald Trump
Oh, yeah.
through an interview he did on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Wow.
This one's long,
Long one.
but you asked for a deep dive on it. So
Yeah, let's do it.
let's do it.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah,
Even if you followed Trump's presidency pretty closely,
right.
this interview gives you such a personal look
Luckily,
at his thought processes.
it's like
his reactions to things.
you get to see what's going on
Yeah.
behind the curtain.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like reality TV
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
But it's real.
It is.
You know what I mean? It's like
a behind-the-scenes documentary
yes.
of someone who had zero experience in government.
Right.
Suddenly finds himself running the country.
Yeah. I mean, just think about that for a second.
Oh, no.
Going from
From Trump Tower
business deals
to the Oval Office.
and boardrooms to the Oval Office.
It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
It is.
So what did he find surprising,
Yeah.
in that role? What frustrated him?
Exactly.
We're going to find out.
That's what we're here for.
And just remember, this deep dive is just for you,
That's right.
based on what you wanted to explore.
Yeah.
So
Let's jump in.
let's jump right in.
All right.
So Trump talks about arriving at the White House
Okay.
for the first time and feeling like it was all surreal.
Uh-huh.
Driving down Pennsylvania Avenue,
All right.
seeing his own hotel surrounded by security.
He mentions that passing his hotel and being amazed
Yeah,
that he couldn't even stop in for a visit.
right. It's like
At night.
you can't even pop in and say hi anymore.
I know. It's like he's suddenly in this bubble
Yeah.
cut off from his old life.
Totally. And he built that hotel.
Exactly. Crazy.
But the part that really stood out to me
Okay.
was his description of the Lincoln bedroom.
Oh, yeah. He kind of gets emotional talking about it, doesn't he?
Yes. You can sense a real reverence for history.
Totally. It's like he's saying, can you believe I'm actually here
right.
in the same room where Lincoln slept?
Yeah.
He talks about seeing the bed, the copy of the Gettysburg Address.
It's powerful.
It clearly made a big impression on him.
It's interesting because you get a glimpse into how those two sides of Trump, the history buff and the real estate mogul, come together.
Right.
He's fascinated by the weight of history,
Yeah.
but also the grandeur and luxury of the place.
It's true. And he compares the White House to the luxury buildings he's built in New York.
Right.
Yeah, and it's almost like he's sizing it up.
I know.
Like a developer.
Totally.
But also acknowledging that this place is in a whole different category.
Absolutely.
It's like
it's almost sacred in a way.
It is. It's like hallowed ground, you know?
This anecdote makes you wonder, did those instincts,
that appreciation for grandeur and history, influence his decisions as president?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Especially because, as he points out, he'd never held elected office before. He was stepping into this role
brand new
with no real government experience.
Yeah.
He even jokes about having to appoint thousands of people he barely knew.
I know.
Can you imagine that?
It's wild.
The learning curve.
Talk about trial by fire.
Yeah.
It's a huge leap to go from running a business to leading a government.
Totally different.
History is full of examples of people making that transition.
Right.
Some successful, some disastrous.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think made Trump's situation unique?
Well, he talks a lot about his reliance on advisors.
Okay.
Especially in those early days.
Makes sense.
And he admits that some of his choices didn't work out so well.
Yeah, he specifically mentions John Bolton.
Oh, yeah.
Calling him a nut job.
Yeah, but then he says having Bolton around made other world leaders take him more seriously.
Really?
Like he was always on the verge of war.
Wow.
It's like he saw the strategic value
Interesting.
in having that kind of unpredictable figure by his side.
It's a fascinating insight
Yeah.
into how he built his team and how he saw himself
Yes.
on the world stage.
Exactly. And this leads us to something else that really stands out in the interview.
Okay.
Trump's communication style.
Right.
He's constantly talking about weaving in stories and avoiding traditional political speeches.
Yeah.
You know?
He really emphasizes that he never uses a teleprompter.
I know.
Ever.
Which explains why his speeches could be so long and rambling at times.
I know.
But he claims that's what people liked about him.
Okay.
That they saw him as authentic.
Right.
Someone who tells it like it is.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
And he even says he's got good comedic timing.
He does.
Which might explain some of those off-the-cuff remarks that would get him in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, remember when he told Hillary Clinton
Oh, yeah.
she'd be in jail?
Huge applause line at his rallies.
It was, and it's interesting to think about how his approach to communication, for better or worse, tapped into a certain desire for authenticity in politics.
For sure. Absolutely.
Like, people were just
tired of the same old.
Tired of the
polish.
Yeah, the polish. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he was definitely a disruptor.
He was.
And speaking of things that disrupted the political landscape, we have to talk about Trump's constant focus on fake news and media bias.
Oh, yeah. That's a major theme throughout the interview.
It is.
He expresses a lot of frustration with what he sees as unfair and inaccurate reporting.
He does.
Yeah.
And you know what? I get it to a certain extent because
it's understandable.
When you're in that position and you feel like
you're being misrepresented.
Yeah, you're constantly being attacked.
It's got to be hard. Yeah, and he calls out specific examples.
He does, like that 60-minute segment about Kamala Harris.
Oh, right.
Which he claims was deceptively edited to make her look good. He actually calls it the biggest scandal in broadcast history.
Wow.
It's a reminder that the relationship between presidents and the media has always been a bit of a tug-of-war.
Right.
But it makes you think about how that dynamic has changed in the age of social media.
Absolutely.
And 24-hour news cycles.
It's a whole different ballgame now.
It is. It's like everyone's got an opinion and they can share it instantly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
The lines between reporting opinion and outright misinformation are more blurred than ever.
And it seems like that's something that really bothered Trump.
It did.
Yeah, he talks about how he feels like the media is constantly trying to undermine him, to twist his words and portray him in a negative light.
Right.
And I'm not saying he was always right.
Of course, but you can see his perspective.
You can see where he's coming from.
Yeah. Do you think his attacks on the media contributed to that feeling of distrust?
I think so.
That many people have towards traditional news sources?
Yeah, I think it's a complex issue.
It is.
With a lot of different factors at play.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely something worth considering.
Especially as we try to navigate this world of information overload.
I know.
And figure out what sources we can trust.
Right. Like, how do we even know what's real anymore?
It's tough.
It's tough.
It's a challenge.
Okay, so let's move on to some of Trump's specific policies.
All right.
And this is where his business background really comes into play.
Okay.
Especially when he starts talking about tariffs.
Yeah, he calls tariffs the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
He does. He clearly sees them as a powerful tool for negotiating and protecting American interests.
Right.
And he gives an example of a huge car factory that was being built in Mexico by a Chinese company.
Interesting.
Specifically to produce cars for the U.S. market.
Wow.
And he claims he was able to stop that project.
Really?
Just by threatening to impose massive tariffs on those cars.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, he's basically saying, don't mess with American jobs.
Right.
Or you'll pay the price.
That's a very direct, almost confrontational approach to trade policy.
It is. It's very Trumpian.
It is.
But it's also important to consider the potential downsides of tariffs.
Right.
Like how they can lead to higher prices for consumers.
Exactly.
And how they can trigger retaliatory measures from other countries.
Which can ultimately harm the economy.
Yeah.
So it's a complex issue.
It is.
With both potential benefits and risks.
Yeah. And he also talks about tax cuts.
Okay.
Boasting about the biggest tax cuts in history that his administration passed.
Right.
And he claims these cuts stimulated the economy.
Okay.
And put more money in people's pockets.
And he argues that contrary to what some critics said, the government actually took in more revenue even with lower tax rates.
Yeah.
He attributes that to a booming economy and companies bringing back money from overseas.
And he makes a point of saying the Democrats said we'd lose trillions, but we made trillions.
But of course, this period also saw a significant increase in the national debt.
Of course.
Which is something his critics often bring up.
Right. And Trump acknowledges that.
Does he?
Yeah, he blames the COVID-19 pandemic for throwing a wrench in his plans.
Yeah.
Saying that the government had to spend a lot of money to support businesses during the crisis.
Makes sense.
It's
interesting how those unforeseen circumstances, like a global pandemic, can completely disrupt even the most carefully crafted economic plans.
It really does. It definitely highlights the unpredictable nature of governing.
For sure.
Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk about healthcare.
All right.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because Trump brings up a chart.
The chart.
Comparing healthcare spending.
Okay.
And health outcomes in different countries.
Interesting.
And he seems genuinely surprised by what the chart shows.
So what did it show?
Well, remember that moment?
I don't know if I do.
Where the U.S. is spending way more.
Oh, yeah.
Than anyone else on
right.
healthcare.
But our health outcomes are terrible.
And our health outcomes are some of the worst.
Yeah.
And it's like he's seeing this for the first time.
Right.
And it's blowing his mind.
Wow.
And he starts talking about the factors
Okay.
contributing to America's healthcare challenges.
Interesting.
And he brings up
like what?
His conversations with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
RFK Jr.
Yeah, who he mentions he plans to appoint to a position focused on health.
Huh.
And he talks about RFK Jr.'s concern that a huge percentage of young men are ineligible for military service.
Oh, wow.
Due to health problems.
Oh.
Largely obesity.
That's a big problem.
It is.
Yeah.
And it seems like that statistic really hit home for Trump.
It did.
And he starts connecting it to things like America's diet.
Okay.
The quality of food available.
Right.
Especially in low-income areas.
That makes sense.
And he even suggests taking some of the money we're sending to Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
And using it to address health problems here in the U.S.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
It raises some big questions about government priorities.
Yes.
And how we allocate resources.
Exactly.
It definitely gets you thinking about the role of government in promoting public health.
For sure. And, it's interesting because it's like he's saying we need to take care of our own people before we're
helping others.
And it's a controversial statement.
It is.
But
it's worth considering.
It's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But there's one more big topic we need to address.
Okay, hit me.
Trump's claims of election fraud.
Oh, boy.
And this is where the interview gets particularly intense.
Yeah.
He doesn't hold back at all.
I bet.
He repeatedly states his belief that the 2020 election was stolen from him.
Right.
And he brings up specific issues.
Okay.
With mail-in ballots, voting machines, and how changes were made to voting procedures.
Okay.
In the lead up to the election.
Right.
And he uses strong language.
Like what?
Saying that the election was rigged, robbed, and stolen.
Wow.
And he focuses on alleged irregularities in specific states.
Which ones?
Like Wisconsin.
Okay.
And he argues that electronic voting machines are vulnerable to manipulation.
Interesting.
He even cites Elon Musk as someone who supports a return to paper ballots for more secure elections.
Okay.
And he also emphasizes the importance of voter ID.
Right.
And even suggests additional measures to prove citizenship.
Wow.
Arguing that this is necessary to ensure fair elections.
So he's really focused on election integrity.
He is.
Interesting.
He claims to have books of evidence to support his claims. But expresses frustration that courts haven't allowed this evidence to be presented.
So he feels like he hasn't been given a fair hearing.
Yeah, basically.
It's important to remember that numerous investigations and legal challenges related to the 2020 election have been conducted.
Yes.
And while some irregularities were found, there hasn't been any evidence of widespread fraud that would have changed the outcome.
Right.
But concerns about election security are certainly valid.
Absolutely.
And need to be taken seriously.
100%.
How do we ensure that our voting systems are secure and accessible, while also maintaining trust in the process?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's one that I think we'll be grappling with for a long time.
For sure.
So
we're going to pause our deep dive here for now, but don't worry.
All right.
We'll be back with more insights.
Looking forward to it.
In part 2.
Okay.
We'll delve into Trump's thoughts on nuclear weapons.
Wow.
His interactions with foreign leaders.
Okay.
And his plans for the future.
All right.
So stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Donald Trump. Before the break, we were talking about
election fraud.
Election fraud, right? Yeah. So let's move on to another kind of heavy topic here.
Okay.
Nuclear weapons.
Yeah. He definitely doesn't shy away from how serious the issue is.
Right. He calls nuclear weapons the biggest threat we have in the world today.
I mean, he really gets into it.
Yeah.
Like a destructive power.
Right.
In a way that's pretty chilling.
It is a stark reminder, I think, of the potential consequences if these weapons were ever used again.
Yeah. And I mean, he even claims that a single bomb could wipe out the entire East Coast.
Oh, wow.
Just like that.
It definitely highlights the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
And then he pivots to talking about
North Korea?
North Korea, yeah, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, and he calls Kim a brilliant guy, but also evil and dangerous.
Wow.
It's interesting how he seems to hold those two seemingly contradictory views.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah, like he admires him in a way.
Yeah, but also recognizes the threat.
Right. You know? It's a strange mix.
It is. And he contrasts his approach to North Korea with that of President Obama. Claiming that Obama was on the verge of war with them, while he was able to establish a relationship with Kim and prevent conflict.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and he talks about the red button comment.
Oh, yeah.
How he told Kim his button was bigger.
Right. Classic Trump bravado.
Yeah. But he also claims he developed a real rapport with Kim.
Really?
Even joking with him about building condos on North Korea's coastline.
Oh, wow.
Like, can you imagine?
That's wild.
Trump Towers, Pyongyang.
It's a very unconventional approach to diplomacy.
Yeah, to say the least.
It is.
But he argues that it worked.
Okay.
That he was able to keep things from escalating into a full-blown conflict.
It's a fascinating example, I think, of how Trump's personality and his willingness to break from traditional diplomatic protocols shaped his foreign policy.
For sure. And speaking of foreign policy, Trump is very vocal about the war in Ukraine.
Right.
He claims that it would never have happened if he were still president.
Huh.
And he attributes that to his strong relationship with Putin.
Okay.
And his energy policies, which he says kept oil prices low.
Right.
And prevented Russia from having the resources to wage war.
Interesting. So he's saying he would have kept Putin in check.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
He says he told Putin directly, Vladimir, you're not going in. And he believes Putin would have listened to him.
That's a bold claim.
It is. But, you know, he also blames the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan for emboldening Putin.
Okay.
Making him think the Biden administration was weak.
Interesting.
You know, like they wouldn't stand up to him.
So it's all about perception.
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to know for sure
Right.
what would have happened if Trump had been in office during the lead up to the invasion.
Right.
But his claims raise interesting questions about the role of personal relationship.
Absolutely.
And perceptions of strength.
For sure.
In international relations.
It's a reminder that those factors can have a real impact on events on the world stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he claims that if he were to be elected again, he can negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine very quickly.
Wow.
He says he knows exactly what to say to each one of them to bring about a resolution.
Interesting.
He doesn't give specifics, but he talks a lot about American power and the need to know how to wield it effectively.
Okay.
And he even gives an example.
Of what?
Of how he used tariffs to pressure the French president into dropping a tax on American companies.
Interesting.
That's a good illustration, I think, of his transactional approach to foreign policy.
Exactly.
He sees economic leverage as a key tool for achieving his goals.
100%. And he criticizes what he sees as the weakness and incompetence of the Biden administration, saying they don't know how to negotiate or command respect from other world leaders.
It's a recurring theme in the interview.
It is.
He portrays himself as a strong, decisive leader.
Yeah.
And contrasts that with what he perceives as the failings of his opponents.
Exactly. And, you know, he also brings up Biden's age and mental acuity.
Oh, boy.
Implying that other countries see him as an easy target.
Wow.
You know, like they don't respect him.
It's a pretty harsh assessment.
It is.
But it reflects the kind of rhetoric he
Yeah.
often uses to attack his political rivals. Exactly.
So now let's shift gears again and talk about something we touched on earlier.
What's that?
Healthcare.
You're talking about that chart that showed the U.S. spends the most on healthcare, but has some of the worst outcomes.
Exactly. It's a pretty stark illustration of the problems with the American healthcare system.
It is. And he blames Big Pharma for driving up drug prices.
Okay.
And criticizes the overall complexity
Right.
and inefficiency of the system.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It is. It's a mess. And he says he wants to bring down drug prices.
Okay.
And reform the system.
But
he doesn't go into detail about how he would achieve those goals.
Of course not.
You know, It's like she's saying, I know how to fix it,
Right.
but I'm not going to tell you how.
Trust me.
Yeah, trust me. But he does make a connection between healthcare
Okay.
and something else he talks about a lot.
What's that?
American strength and vitality.
Oh. Okay.
You're referring to his comments about young men being ineligible for military service due to health problems.
Yeah, he seems really concerned about that.
He is. He sees that as a sign that something is seriously wrong.
Okay.
And he connects it to poor diet, lack of exercise, exposure to environmental toxins.
Yeah. All these things that are contributing to this decline in health.
Right. And it's like he's saying, if we don't fix this, we're going to be in trouble.
We're going to be weak.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting how he ties that to national security.
It's all connected.
It is. He seems to be suggesting that improving public health is essential for maintaining America's global standing.
It's an interesting way of framing the issue.
It is.
And it ties into his broader message about making America great again.
Exactly. Okay, so let's lighten things up a bit.
Right.
Trump talks about his use of social media, particularly TikTok, and how he's gained a lot of support from young people through that platform.
Interesting.
And it's a reminder of the growing influence of social media in politics.
Absolutely.
And how candidates need to adapt their strategies to reach younger voters.
Yeah, times have changed.
They have. They have. He also talks about his rallies.
Okay.
And how he's able to connect with crowds in a way that his opponents can't.
He really emphasizes that aspect of showmanship and his ability to generate excitement and enthusiasm.
Yeah, he's a master of it.
He is.
You know, it's a skill he honed during his years in business and reality television.
And it definitely translated to the political arena.
It did. It did.
He even tells a story about a recent visit he made to McDonald's.
Wait, what?
McDonald's. Apparently, he went there to highlight the fact that Kamala Harris had lied.
Oh, wow.
About working at McDonald's as a young person.
That's so Trump.
It is using a seemingly mundane event to attack his opponent.
Yes.
And control the narrative.
It's brilliant. And he claims the McDonald's visit was a huge hit on Google.
Really?
Generating more searches than any other event in recent memory.
Wow.
Whether it was intentional or not.
Right.
It's another example of how he's able to dominate the news cycle, even with seemingly trivial actions.
It's amazing. Okay, we're going to pause our deep dive here again. In part 3, we'll explore Trump's views on UFOs, his plans for a potential second term, and his reflections on his legacy.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
And we've covered a lot of ground, but there's one more area I think we need to touch on.
Okay, what's that?
Trump's views on UFOs.
UFOs? Really?
Yeah, he actually talks about it in the interview.
Wow, I'm intrigued.
Or, as the government prefers to call them now,
what?
UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
Okay. So what does he say? Does he believe in aliens?
He doesn't come right out and say he's met little green men, but he does say he thinks there's something out there that we don't understand.
It's interesting how this topic
has gone from like fringe conspiracy theory to something even Congress is taking seriously.
Right.
And Trump seems to reflect that shift.
Yeah, he's curious, but not completely convinced.
Right. He mentions pilots and military personnel seeing things they can't explain. It's not full-blown X-Files, but it definitely leaves you wondering.
It speaks to that human fascination, I think, with the unknown, the possibility that we're not alone in the universe.
It's a big universe.
It is.
Okay, so back down to earth.
Right.
Trump also talks about what he'd do if he wins another term as president.
So what's on his agenda?
Well, he focuses on familiar themes.
Like what?
Restoring American strength, cracking down on immigration, challenging the establishment.
Okay.
You know, he talks about finishing the border wall, bringing back manufacturing jobs, appointing conservative judges.
There's a continuation of the America First agenda.
Exactly.
He pushed in his first term.
Yes. And he also wants to be tougher on China.
Okay.
Both economically and militarily.
Right.
And pull back from foreign conflicts.
So kind of an isolationist approach?
In a way.
Yeah.
And of course, there are the jabs at his opponents.
No, I bet.
He calls them weak, incompetent, controlled by special interests.
Classic Trump.
It is. It's that classic Trump rhetoric designed to fire up his base.
And it's definitely effective
at
getting attention and stirring up emotions.
Love him or hate him.
Right.
He knows how to make a statement.
He does. So As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's striking how much Trump has impacted American politics,
Uh-huh.
even years after leaving office.
He has. He's a polarizing figure
Totally.
who inspires intense reactions on both sides.
Absolutely. His supporters see him as a disruptor,
Right.
someone who tells it like it is, and fights for the forgotten man.
Yes.
His critics see him as a danger to democracy,
Yeah.
someone who divides and incites.
It's interesting how you can have such different views
It is.
of the same person.
It's clear he's changed the way we talk about politics, the way we think about leadership.
He has.
And his influence will continue to be felt for a long time.
Yeah. It's made me think about what kind of leader America needs going forward.
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
You know, do we need someone who plays by the rules?
Right.
Or someone who shakes things up?
Interesting.
Someone who unites?
Yeah.
Or someone who fights?
It's a tough one.
It is. It is.
This deep dive has hopefully given you some food for thought.
Yeah.
Some new perspectives to consider.
I think so.
So
it's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
It has. We went from Lincoln's bedroom to UFOs, from tariffs to TikTok. What a journey.
It really has been. And you know what? The biggest takeaway for me is that understanding Donald Trump requires looking beyond the headlines and the sound bites.
You have to get into the mind of the man. See the world through his eyes.
Exactly.
Even if you don't agree with him.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive.
Right.
To give you a glimpse into that mind.
That worldview.
Yeah. We hope it sparked your curiosity.
Absolutely.
And given you some new insights to consider.
Keep exploring.
Keep learning.
And keep those deep dives coming.
We'll see you next time.